idea for all this really came from a dream?
Yes, it did.
Good evening and welcome to Nox Mente. Tonight's guest is William Ramsey. Attorney, author, and researcher William Ramsey is a graduate of the University of California, Berkeley, with a degree in history. William also has a JD and is a member of the State Bar of California. He is the author of Prophet of Evil, Aleister Crowley, 9/11 and the New World Order, Abomination, Devil Worship and Deception in the West Memphis Three Murders, and Children of the Beast, Aleister Crowley's Shadow over Humanity. William has made two documentaries, Occult Hollywood Volume 1 and Prophet of Evil, Aleister Crowley, 9/11 and the New World Order. William, welcome to the show. Yeah, it's awesome to have you. Wait. Something's up. I don't. The audio working. This never happens.
Tech issues.
QB. All right. And you hear me now? Say something.
Check 1 2. Check
all right. William, welcome to the show.
Take two. It's almost like Mercury retrograde, but it's not Mercury retrograde.
Hey, at least I caught it before it was like 10 minutes into the show.
I know.
I've actually lost a Zoom interview, so I shut that down Zoom too early, and
you can usually open it back up and it will recover sometimes.
I don't know.
That sucks. Sorry about that. Anyway, continue.
It's all part of the game. That's for sure. And it's an exciting game because it gives people, we all have access to listening to more content that's not going through the mill of the big six, right? So anyway, William, this is awesome. So glad to have you here. Let's dive right in. So the world you grew up in, so looking for the things that stick out, the symbols that stick out. So were you a child that played in the woods? I already know now that you were born in Nebraska. So relationship with nature, cornfields, perhaps. Comic books, movies, all that kind of stuff that you enjoyed very early on.
That's a tough question. I think some of my earlier memories actually of Nebraska are positive. Very cold, but also during the summer, it kind of has these rolling. There's definitely nothing on the horizon, but there's rolling grass fields. And I think as a young child, I remember playing in those fields very much, like when I was 2 or 3. Those are probably some early. So those are good memories. As far as like symbols and things, I grew up Catholic, so it was a lot of crucifixes and strange, a lot of statuary and stuff like that in church. I was a fairly regular churchgoer, so those are things that I remember and didn't really know much about, so they were mysterious and kind of cryptic. At least if you want to talk about my earlier memories.
Yeah. This is stuff that sticks out. What about like pop culture, comic books, cartoons? What kind of stuff like that did you enjoy?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I don't know what age time you're interested in, but I mean, I'm old enough to have to get up and change the TV without a remote. So I watched those shows from a very early age.
So are we.
Yeah. We're Gen X.
Okay. So I used to watch, I liked the old horror movies. Those were all good. So the original, it came from the Black Lagoon, the original black and white, Dracula, the Bela Lugosi. They used to have something when kind of earliest memories, my family moved out of Nebraska when I was 2 or 3, and we used to have this old black and white TV. And Friday night, I think it was Friday night horror we would stay up late, which is like 10 o'clock. And those were really good memories of just sitting down with a bowl of popcorn and watching those types of cheesy films. But I think at that age, they weren't cheesy to me at all. They were really interesting, exciting. The original Frankenstein, and I really liked the Godzilla, the Japanese Godzilla, Mothra, and the three. I can't even remember their names, but those are really very early. Gamera, yeah. What's the one with the three heads? I can't remember that one's name, but
I can see it though. That is some good stuff.
Yeah, so those are very positive. Like those were really enthralling.
Did you do a lot of the old reruns of what was it, Twilight Zone and all that?
Yeah, so I like Twilight Zone. They used to have this other show that was really good. It was like a short Twilight Zone horror show. I can't remember the name of it, but it'll come to me. But it actually, I think.
Creepshow?
What was it?
There was Creepshow. There was
Creepshow. I think it was Creepshow,
yeah.
not the movie. I remember the movie.
Yeah, there was a TV show. It was HBO, I think.
Yeah, that was really fun to watch.
What do you think attracted you to all the early on to the horror stuff?
It was, mildly scary. Like it wasn't super. It wasn't super. I don't remember it being very graphic, but fun to watch, and it was fun to watch with your friends. So those were good. Yeah, those are good memories. Like that, you'd have sleepovers when you were 6 or 7.
Yeah.
Scared, but you never really that scared. So it was, there's some scary movies today.
It's a whole different world.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I loved all that too.
I don't really find today's horror movies scary per se. They're more just shock, violent shock value. And that's the scare, not anything that's psychological.
I agree with that.
Not that those don't exist. Just
trying to think like real psychological scary ones for me are like Shining. I thought was psychologically scary.
Yeah.
So those ones, like the adult fears.
Yeah.
Different than horror.
I was definitely attracted to psychological horror for some reason. I was just like, I'm going to say this, but I think it's an intelligence thing sometimes, where you need that little extra edge where you're piecing together the psycho aspect of horror. But I don't know, slashers was never a big slasher fan. This is why things like Night Gallery and Twilight Zone and that kind of stuff just really. I love hearing Catholic, at least people that grew up Catholic, and making the connection to horror. There seems to be a lot of that I've noticed with you Catholic people.
Yeah, no, I'm not. It's not surprising at all. I mean, there's kind of that same kind of. The Catholic Church, I think, tries to promote kind of awe and mystery, and so you're kind of like, "What's this priest doing up there?" There's a bunch of, there's a bunch of icons and drawings, and you kind of have to go. Like some of my earliest memories are going to confession. Like I spent my time thinking about what to confess. Like I really wasn't like a bad kid, like maybe a naughty kid who would eat an extra cookie out of the cookie jar or something. But you would go into this dark room and sit there, and there'd be like a little lattice work with the dude on the other side. So, there's kind of definitely, I think it's interesting that you make that point. There's definitely an overlap, I think, of that kind of subtle mystery horror that people have when they watch, not super graphic horror films, but
mysterious stuff. Yeah. There, this is, and as I've said many times, so anyone listening to the show knows this, I think I'm not a Christian. And so I wasn't brought up that way, but I really love the beauty of Catholicism and how, as an adult looking in, how mysterious it all is still. I mean, come on, the incense, a choir, if you're at a cathedral, there's nothing that stirs that kind of energy.
It's magic.
Yeah. I mean, it's pure bliss looking in, as just like on the occultic level.
Yeah, I mean, you could make that argument. I mean, I've been to St. Peter's in Rome, and I've actually been to a papal audience, and I mean, that's why some people, they convert to Catholicism, is they like that mystery. They like the brazier with the incense. They
Yeah.
like the hierarchy of the priesthood.
Midnight mass.
Hey, man, if you walk around at the St. Peter's Cathedral, it's full of occult stuff.
Oh,
A lot of
yeah.
these Christians don't even know. The sundial's there. The
Obelisks.
obelisk is there from Egypt, like literally an obelisk that came to Rome from Caligula is sitting right in the center of St. Peter's Cathedral. And I've had those arguments with these, Catholic types who say, well, the Catholic Church, they transcended the old occult meaning of these things. And I've said, but it's still there, man, because you still see that kind of stuff in Masonic. See it in Washington, D.C. So
Exactly.
you
Oh,
might
yeah.
get the same kind of mysterious feeling being in Catholic Church in Rome as you would in Washington, D.C.
It was more of an absorption than a transcending.
Well, the symbols speak no matter what. We don't have to consciously even acknowledge them. It's happening, under the surface. And so that's part of it.
Well, don't you think that's the power of symbols? Is their subconscious meaning that it's
Yeah,
more?
oh,
than-
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any
Definitely.
symbol, even Christian, occult, magic, Islam, even the black cubes and all that stuff. Islam has
All
lot.
of it. Well, that
The
black
black
cube
cube is Saturn.
yeah, that's and isn't there doesn't it have like an ET origin or something? Isn't it from
There's a piece of a meteorite. The Kaaba holds a piece of a meteorite.
yeah.
Correct. So touching that meteorite is like a sacred thing
Kissing
when
it.
you do the Hajj.
Now,
Yeah.
the conspiracy people will say that that's really black goo, that piece of meteorite, and when you kiss it, it will program you to be Islamic or Muslim, whatever. That's why they all go around in circles. It's funny.
Well, yeah.
Well, that
I
whole
mean,
circle thing too, circling the square and all that.
Yeah.
yeah,
that's true.
Islam has a lot of occultism. You start getting really into deep Islam. It's Muhammad.
See,
Yeah, it's pretty intense. I mean, you can get into revealed books. You can get into the similarities between Muhammad, Joseph Smith, Aleister Crowley,
yeah, Elron.
yeah, L. Ron Hubbard.
Mhm.
So back when you were young, William, do you remember being a child that dreamt? Do you remember dreaming, having any of that kind of experience?
Absolutely. I think that as I got older, I don't dream as much, although I still have dreams, but much more vivid dreaming when I was sure. Like real, like literal, tangible dreams and, things that you see in the future, right? So deja vu type dreams, much more. I think I would have more meaningful dreams of processing things that were happening in my life and then them being addressed in dreams that don't happen to me now. I'm 50. I just turned 50, so I don't have those kind of big dreams. I've had some, but not with the kind of clarity and the awe-inspiringness that you have when you're 8 or 10.
Do you have a couple that may stand out from your earliest dreams? Some images or something?
Oh, not right now. I don't remember them.
What about, and so still with the young William, what about night terrors and nightmares?
I mean, I feel like I had some dreams where like I'd go into my parents' room, but when I was young, but I never had night terrors or anything like that. I think I've experienced like, yeah, but no, I never really like wake up and scream, but maybe like wake up and go, wow, what was that? But no, never had any.
You're the
never had any night terrors. Yeah, I've never had any night.
Did you, and also back in this early period, did you experience anything that's common, the common stuff like being afraid in the dark or something under the bed?
Yeah,
That
yeah, for sure. Go to sleep, when you're 6 or 7, maybe keep the light on.
Yeah.
Afraid of stuff in the closet? Absolutely.
Yeah. And so also, this is stirring a little woo into the pot. Did you, I don't know when this may have entered your cognitive self or conscious self, the idea of others. So from some of the movies, and certainly Gen X, we got some of this. So the ET stuff, like at night.
I never had those. I never had that kind of ET UFO phenomenon thing happen. So I don't. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, yeah. Well, just like with the fear of the dark and fear of things under the bed and in the closet, it's just something I've just started to sniff out a little bit. A few people have been like, I had these fears when I was little, and guess what? It was this fear of these gray aliens. So I'm trying to sniff out if this is a generational thing, where that is.
I didn't have anything that exciting. I had friends who literally had like magical friends they would talk to, like that kind of weird kind of thing, but nothing like that really was ever really that exciting in my. I don't remember anything like that. I just remember maybe just like dreams that would involve things that happened during the day. But I never had an alien dream. Although I've seen weird things in the sky. I used to work in Yosemite and you'd stare up at the sky all the time. Clearly there's other things going on around there. I don't know if they're UFOs. They're probably like secret space program type stuff, but no,
Right.
I never had visitation events ever.
I'm going to hijack this conversation right now. So you worked in Yosemite. What about like the missing 411, that type of stuff with David Paulides?
Well, that definitely happens. I mean, there's a lot of weird stuff that happens in those areas, and I mean, really terrifying stuff. Like I think I was there in '88, and then the Stainer guy was one who, like, uh, just did horrible things to people. But there were rumors up there of cults, and there were rumors of body parts coming down the rivers. So there was definitely a dark, kind of primeval, primordial current that was there, that was underneath there at night, but not.
Kind of like the UN.
Yeah. There's definitely something at the UN. Holy smokes.
Yeah.
I know, right?
But Yosemite is interesting because it was like a mix of like primeval, primordial world of like enchanted evenings, and then like a McDonald's Disneyland atmosphere during the day. Because you could go up into the higher parts there and sleep, and like literally, it's like you could feel a completely different emotional, mental state in the middle of the night where things in the dark are definitely walking around, and then go back and you're eating at some, food stand with a bunch of tourists who can't figure out where Half Dome is. There's definitely that duality.
When you say there was cult activity or a cult, I missed which version of
Well,
that.
there were rumors that people would disappear, and so some people argued that there was some kind of cult activity up there that was associated with the occult, but I never saw any. But they said the same thing. They're actually, when I grew up in Northern California, up in the Santa Cruz Hills, there was definitely cult activity, and people knew about it. People would go up there to go into the older redwood forest that kind of semi-exist in the spaces between Santa Cruz and San Jose.
Mm-hmm.
So that was there. There was definitely that undercurrent, or you want to call it a cold current, sure, but I was never, I wasn't interested in that or a part of that.
Yeah, it's just interesting to broaden the scope of what's going on in the national forests, and it's nice to get inside information. Inside is that you work there, so you got to experience, the polarity of the dayside show, dog and pony show with the tourists, and then the mystery.
No, because the mysteries are there. You didn't have to go very far. Because the strange things about Yosemite is very few people actually go into the backcountry. They just drive in, they stay at a hotel, and then leave. But you didn't have to go more than 5 miles, and you were in the middle of literally primeval, California. So in that regard, it was great. Like those are very good memories, but and then you kind of come back. It was like a little mini adventure, but not having to go that far. That was a
How?
long time ago, 30 years ago.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to ask. How old you were when you were working there? So you're like 20s.
Yeah, but the other interesting thing is that there were a lot of Indians, so there's a lot of Native Americans around there. So I
Hmm.
actually used to meet a lot of Native Americans, a lot of Mormons. So you see this weird kind of mishmash of different people from different cultures. So it was interesting. I used to play basketball with these two Indians, and they would just do incredible things because they would talk to each other in their own language, and nobody would say, like, you would understand if you heard the words "pass me the ball," but if you heard somebody in Native American say that, it wouldn't even register in their brain. And these guys would make incredible plays and passes and just mystify the Westerners. It was incredible. It was fun to play with them.
If they were only taller.
They weren't very tall, but they were very athletic.
Well, the Navajo are tall. The Plains Indians are very tall.
I think the ones, I don't know which Indian tribe, I don't remember.
All the Great Plains Indians, all that I know, are 6'5", 6'6", 6'7". They're very tall. And so I think of like more the Pueblo Indians that are shorter.
I think they were from northern Arizona, so they were the kind of Native Americans who got integrated into the LDS Church.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know exactly. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. That that's like someone that's just. My mother is Sac Fox from Iowa, and so I just had a lot of exposure to different natives in the States, and a lot of people think that they're short. I think that comes from maybe this more Southern American Indians too, like get down to New Mexico, Arizona, into Mexico. Uh, anyway, so I was curious about when you were working there. Was there anything that was going on in your dream life then? Were you still dreaming pretty significantly at that point?
I don't remember. I don't think so. I think I was slept. I actually was in really good physical shape, so I would sleep like a rock. And I was very active. I was outdoors and active very much, and hiking all the time. So I don't really recollect having really vivid dreams, but just just kind of being in that kind of liminal state at times
Yeah.
between civilization and really what comes to mind to me is also when you drive Highway 1 out here, you go through Big Sur where nobody really lives in that southern part, and you see that primeval feel
Yes.
without humanity, and that's what my memories of certain parts of the Sierra Nevadas.
Yeah. And so while we're still there, Eddie, did you ever experience anything with, say, cryptids like Sasquatch?
No, no, never saw any Sasquatch or anything like that. I remember being out at night staring at the sky and seeing literally like some kind of light fall out of the sky, and I was like, that wasn't anything that was an airplane or anything like that. But I never had a kind of like something came through a portal or anything like that. I just don't think that was really in my mindset at that time.
Yeah. Well, those are the best people. Like for me, when I only had one Sasquatch experience, and I never even thought. I always thought it was a joke. Seriously, I'm so open minded to all this other stuff, but when it came to like Bigfoot, it was like no way. And then out and out hood. But so let's talk about the dream landscape for you in general. When you dream, how does it appear? Is it in color? Is it
Always in color.
yeah?
Always in color.
Are
And
there
yeah, I mean they're usually pleasant dreams. I don't usually have really like dark some people always have these like menacing dreams or
Hmm.
visionary dreams. Mine are usually kind of like your brain is just firing off from dreams.
Yeah.
I used to have I used I used to have these horrible dreams when I was in law school that I would miss a test. And so I used to have these horrible dreams where I would wake up and then I would be like, "Oh no, I missed a test." So like you would have this is my other cat.
That cat is gorgeous. I
This
love
is a
her.
Russian blue. We found it.
Yeah.
His name is Sage. Yeah,
Oh my God, that's a gorgeous cat.
he's really a big old troublemaker, but he's a good cat. He has a weird kind of meow. It's not like a true cat meow. It's like a squeak. Very different. It's a different type of cat. Uh, he's-
Blue fur in nature is my favorite.
yeah, it's cool. And they supposedly they don't really molt. They don't really shed their fur, so that's nice. But as far as dreams, always in color, and never, I've had some interesting dreams, like deja vu dreams, like I've seen something in a dream, but never really yeah, I mean some people they have great dreams or vivid dreams or fever dreams or something like that. I don't think I've ever had that.
Well, you mentioned when you were young, you had made the comment that led me to believe that your early dreams were, you'd mentioned deja vu with them. It led me to think maybe some precog stuff was going on, like you would dream true. Did you have any hits where you're like, I remember this, I remember dreaming this, or this
Yeah.
this came to pass?
Yes. Like sometimes you would have a dream and then be in a very normal, not kind of a standard, event and then say I've dreamed that. But typically within a shorter period of time than that last dream. So it wouldn't be like 10 years later, it would be within the next year or two. But never really, those are really my experiences with deja vu.
They still count.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Definitely still counts. And I love that. It seems to be less common to hear that in my experience, where people can attribute deja vus to a dream.
But that's always kind of where my deja vu experiences are. They're all experienced back to my dreams.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, me too. And so that was listening to deja vu experiences with a lot of talking about this. It's always interesting to see where people connect them, but you'd be surprised. I think we're in the minority.
Oh, interesting.
Hmm. So let's talk architecture and dreams for a minute too. In the just overall in your life, it doesn't matter when. Are there familiar dreamscapes? Now I know that we're talking dreams, so they change. They have this mutability to them. But where it's like you go back, you're like, oh, I know this house or I know that place, even though it may appear different. There's this knowing of it.
Yes, that sounds right. So the landscape is familiar in most of my dreams. Say, like I'm not in some other place that I've never seen before. If I have, yeah. I mean, if you're talking within the context of, precognition, it's usually that way. But I don't really have dreams of I'm in some unusual place. No.
And then also, what about like the classic dream stuff, like flying dreams?
Oh, I think I had them more when I was younger. Definitely, I would have flying dreams. Like flying to school.
Mm-hmm.
I remember dreams of like seventh grade. You would fly instead of riding my bike.
What kind of flyer were you?
Like Superman, like flying.
I love that.
I think it was a response to the drudgery of biking 20 minutes to school.
Oh man, that's quite
You want to get there faster.
Yeah. Was that so? You left Nebraska at like 2 or 3, and you moved to California?
Correct. So I lived in Northern California till graduated from college in '93. Went to law school in DC from '95 to '98. then moved back Northern California, and I've been in LA since 2002.
It's impressive, though, that you still have those memories of Nebraska at that young age. That's,
I actually have very early memories that most people would say they don't have memory. Like, you're not supposed to be able to remember anything from before you're 2.
And so, one of the signators there too is that you did move early on, so you could place stuff easily to that period. That's instead of someone who never really left the same place, and the dynamic of memory and all that comes in. But you moved when you were 2 or 3, so those memories place you there with memory.
Yes.
What kind? So, and the memories you have in Nebraska were basically what you gave us earlier.
No, but I mean, I still remember certain things of the house that I lived in. I was the youngest of four, so I had older sisters, and I still remember them at a time that you're not. And I've talked to my parents, and they say, well, that was the house that we lived in when you were 1.5. So how would I know the entryway, where the kitchen was placed, where the sliding glass door was placed, where the stairs to the upstairs were, where the living room was?
That's what's impressive, because you can, it's clearly you move, you're here, you're in this landscape, and then you're not. So when you pull those memories up and talk to a parent or someone that was there, that's impressive.
But they're not like super long memories. They're just snapshots, So I do remember my brother and sister when they were just, 3. My older sister's 4 years older than me.
Yeah.
So I still kind of have those memories. I still have youthful vignettes, like snapshots, not like something I remember the whole thing that happened over 2 hours. Like I could retrace my steps last night for 3 hours, but but those early memories of being somewhere between 1 and 2, I remember that.
Yeah, that's great. It's great, especially with the stuff that I dive into. I'm interested in with memory and dream, and the whole idea of how elusive and transitory these things can be.
But it's interesting because in my understanding, I'm no trained psychologist, but I was told that you're not supposed to be able to remember anything before you're 2. And that's kind of right at the crux of where those memories that I have are.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot we could deep dive on that for sure. I have memories back to 6 months, because we'd moved when I was 6 months old, and I have just snapshots, but my mother said the same thing. Oh, that was this house, and so that's what's great about having signators. Like, this house was this house, and we moved, and so you pull up these images. What about so with the idea of all this, and your interest in like early horror and sci-fi, where do you think, so this is not really in the dream territory, but I did want to do a little dive into the Crowley stuff.
Okay.
If you don't mind. So where do you think, how do you think you got onto that?
Well, I know where I got onto it is that I was a 9/11 researcher. So I was trying to figure out these numerology that other people believe in. I never really studied numerology. I wasn't interested in it. I never bought a book on the New Age. But I think that other people like Crowley and even like I talk about it in my most recent movie that I put out, Occult Hollywood version 2, which is that the great monolith that Kubrick uses is 11 feet tall. So why is this 11 all over the place? Why is Harry Potter's wand 11? So I think that that's really what led me back to Crowley, is like his 93 and 77 all the way back. So that was really, I was starting, it's probably 2005 or 6, not that long ago. But
those were 2 of the flight numbers too, right? 77 and 93.
So I do believe that whole event of 2001 was pre-planned, and that there's all kinds of occult indicators there that I think the people who planned it did for occult reasons and reasons for power, what they thought they could pull off, which I did think pulled off.
Oh yeah.
Crowley's kind of prime number. The real Crowley number that leads back to Crowley is 93. So that was the number that Crowley used through the gematria and transliterated two big important words in his religion, which were agape and thelema. Both. Mm-hmm. So that's it. So that's really 9/11 is where I started.
Jerry, what were you trying to add?
I was just going to say that next Wednesday night, is our new show, The Obelisk, which is going to be about 9/11, on 9/11, starting at 9/11, by the way.
We're driving that home.
Yeah, but we're gonna look at the esoteric side, how the ritualistic aspects of 9/11, including the numerology.
Right. Well, I mean, if you really want to get deep, look at the architecture. Look at the whole architecture that leads back through Rockefeller, through the UN, through World Trade Center, through the Great Spherical Caryatid, through the 111 stories on each building, through the idea of passing through the gates of Hercules, I think it is, where like there's a clear method of transformation in that date of going from one phase of world history to another. And I think that's the intent. So there's a lot going on. And I think the people who designed it, there's a really great interview by but the architect who built some of the stuff on that. It was I can't even remember right now. I'm too old. I forget names.
It's okay.
But anyway, it'll come to me.
Did you see that today that architects for 9/11, architects and engineers for 9/11 put out a report? I think it was them today about World Trade Center, about Building 7. Yeah.
Well, the extenography is a very big deal when you start digging into it, because it goes way back, and the whole X. I mean, it's more than this, but X marks the spot is a big deal throughout the occult.
Right. Well, when you say externography, what do you mean by that?
I mean the occult symbology under the surface of the symbol itself.
Well, I think that's the externography is like the whole hooked X thing, and the X's in project names and whatnot. It's a series of connections that a dark journalist has found, going back all the way back to like Blavatsky and Rudolf Steiner, all that stuff.
Interesting.
Going back to Sumer and Egypt, and it goes way back as far as we've got recorded cultures. It's everywhere, and when you see it, it doesn't have to be the hooked X. But the hooked X certainly is what a lot of people think about, but it was always like that whole X marks the spot thing. Is there's something here for those who know and have eyes to see? And so, and in context to this conversation with 9/11, that is a juicy aspect that you were just bringing up, William. But so why I went there is I wanted to know, much like this X that we're talking about, where the kernel was from the synchronistic wave that got you onto. So that got you into Crowley, which we find out is 9/11. Where do you think the kernel is of what would get you into these waters to begin with? Why would you start questioning these realities? Where is that?
It's actually not because of knowledge, it's because of lack of knowledge. So I didn't know these things existed. I didn't know somebody like Crowley existed. I didn't have that background to fit that into my mind. I would have a biblical background, maybe the Witch of Endor or Janus and Jambres, who strived against Moses, which is referred to from St. Paul, but nothing in the modern sense. So I think that I wanted to know what these people think. And I didn't come from an elite family or go to these private schools. I didn't have entry into any kind of masonry or secret societies. So that's really what really made me want to figure it out. Like, what's really going on? Who are these people? And why is there a connection between these people and this event? And really trying to figure out, because there is something secret under the surface. Once you really get under that, the occult, and it's not fashionable to say, but the occult or esotericism has had a much greater impact upon human events, human history, human culture than people really want to say, really acknowledge. And I think that that's kind of why I really looked into Crowley in depth and really wanted to figure out what he said without an intermediary. So that was really kind of the idea of going back and looking at all the source text, which is very laborious in Crowley's regard, because there's just so much information. So that was a decent amount of lifting, but it really, I think it's based and sourced in not knowing, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, you've definitely given us this picture of you as a curious person early on, which this is this is my kind of people. I like people that are curious and are questioning. Would you give us some insight into? We talked about this in the pre-show a little bit about dreams in context to Crowley and where all that fits in.
Well, that's a good question. I think that some people intuited, or there was some kind of current, if you want to call it a collective unconscious, or something, that 9/11 was going to happen. Because I've talked to a number of people who had strange dreams about the Twin Towers, or there was something liminal or something in in this kind of dreamscape that rests underneath our superconscious, or our frontal lobe thinking. And I think that those dreams of this kind of Crowleyan 9/11, because I do believe 9/11 was tied in part to Crowley. So I do think that a lot of people experience a lot. Some people had premonitions of something bad happening. So
now, a lot of people will say that the echoes, if you will, of 9/11 in media prior to 9/11 were predictive programming, and I would argue that it's more like premonition turned into creative energy. Instead of having a dream about 9/11, you get the idea for putting something that looks 9/11-ish in The Simpsons, for instance, in the 90s, things like that. What do you think about
Well, that's an interesting point. I think a lot of people knew that 9/11 was going to happen. I think it was an important date. I think 2001 was an important date. I think that really intelligent people who were interested in facilitating this kind of global change integrated these concepts into the common culture, whether it was Kubrick, Arthur C. Clarke,
Donald
some of these other
Rumsfeld?
people. Pardon me?
Donald Rumsfeld.
Donald Rumsfeld seemed to know what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people seemed to know. They were all kind of an elite bent, kind of high Masonic, post-Masonic types seemed to know. So the symbolism and all that stuff was all leading up to this event that, really kind of changed the world. It kind of peeled off the old skin and replaced it with something new that, for me, was not positive for humanity.
It's not positive in any way.
No. And that's your number 11. If you want to go back and read, like in Prophet of Evil, the number of 11 is associated with all kinds of baleful, negative things. So,
sure. And you also can look at it that the 9 and 11 are part of the tree of life, and I forget which Sephirah they are exactly, but by going from 9 to 11, you skip death.
Right. Skip Doth or whatever.
Yeah, Doth, right.
9 itself is kind of a power number, like LaVey used 9 as like the top number. The Beatles kind of referenced it. So 9 seems to be
Tesla. Love 9 as well.
Power word. And then 11 is the meeting of the macrocosm and the microcosm and the magicians.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, people ask me, why did they do it on 9/11? I don't think they had a choice. Honestly, if you're going to pick the proper date to have a magical working, I don't think you have a choice but to pick. And it's interesting, too, that date was a date that coincides with the Christian kind of calendar. So
Right.
it wasn't some kind of occult calendar. It wasn't a Jewish calendar. It's not the what do you call it? The Islamic calendar, the moon. It's basically a moon calendar. So why did these people decide to have that date based upon current Christian calendar tradition?
I've thought about that too, and I think that it comes down to it doesn't matter. It's the idea of the date that matters.
I think you're right.
Well, right. The idea is a thought, and so the thought, a thought, then
There's a thought form.
becomes a conscious form, starts forming its own consciousness, and like a tulpa. Did we lose William?
He probably went to get his dog or something.
Sorry, somebody's at the door. I'm
Okay,
back.
no problem. Take your time.
I'm good. We're good.
I'm like, where'd William go? So with all this, with the idea of, say, architects setting this up through sigils, and I mean that loosely, sigil. So it doesn't have to be a specific cabal of people coming together. It could. It's not off the table. But where they're feeding thought forms, and thought forms that are placed in public for a greater working in different areas. And certainly we could examine all the stuff that has come forward in different events. The Simpsons had this and all that kind of stuff. But so thought forms that are placed in public to be seen, like they did in the medieval period, where you had to publicly place something on on a tree stump, or all this. This is justified. So you have an unconscious group of people unconsciously feeding into a sigil, and then by unconsciously feeding into it, we're looking at energy now, and we're looking at the idea of energetics. Then that in effect can turn and manifest something, and we get chatter, and then the thoughts happen. Do you think all this was at play?
That's a tough question. I do think that these guys use sigils, hyper sigils, and try to do things to, make adjustments in the psychosphere, if you really want to. I like that term in some ways.
Yeah, that's a good one.
It's interesting because I really enjoyed the True Detective first season, and they used a lot of stuff or ideas that were arguably lifted from Thomas Ligotti, who had this kind of idea of the psychosphere. And Ligotti himself was an OTO member. He actually plays in a cult band. So I do think that the really sophisticated ones, the experienced long-term kind of occultists, definitely play that game for sure. And definitely, I think that game is influential because I think in their thought, if you look at guys like Genesis P. Orridge, they're trying to facilitate this kind of, and even Crowley himself, like Crowley's number for global, illumination was 418. So these guys put that stuff out there with the intent that maybe somebody will see that and wonder what that is, and have this very synchronistic influence upon the way they think and act. So I do think that that's really true. I don't think it's as overt. I think 9/11 itself was a hyper powerful, traumatic event for a variety of people, and it was very sophisticated because I think there was people in the know and people not in the know. So, I think what you're saying, if I understand what your question is, I do think that those high-end occultists, the real magi, the maguses, are doing that to make that change. And I think the ultimate change is New World Order principles. And from a Christian perspective, it's the ultimate thing is to put Satan in the seat of God in Jerusalem. I think that's really what it is.
So with with all this in mind, I want to jump back to the idea of lucid dreaming. And so you mentioned earlier that you had very vivid dreams as a young person. So first of all, what's your idea of high lucidity in a dream, in the dreamscape? And have you attained that or experienced that? And it doesn't matter what period of your life, but
I think I've experienced something like that. Yeah, I think so. I mean,
where
I think
you're,
some people have different dreams where they come to like their realization of what they're supposed to do with their life or solution to personal problems. So I think that those are the highest lucid dreams where like you snap out of a sleep state and you solve a problem. So I think in some ways I've had something like that, but that's the way I would decide. I would describe this hyper top level, top tier lucidity.
where you realize that you're dreaming.
Right. Yeah, I think so. I think you know that you're in. You know, I think that if you really want to, I certainly haven't done like, actually it's interesting because the dreams do pop up often in the Bible. There are tons of dreams, informative dreams, Joseph's dreams, instructive dreams of the Old Testament. And I think that that's why, in part, Freud did talk about dreams often. He wrote a book about analysis of dream analysis, right? So you probably. But so I do think that if you really want to get into dreams, I think that you would have to start parsing dreams through different varieties of dreams, just random misfires, meaningful dreams, prophetic dreams, informative dreams. So
Yeah.
hyper lucid dreams.
Well, one of the I guess avenues I'm going here with is because in context to you, as this show's about you, and the work you've done is this idea of true lucidity, and within the dreamscape, the idea of doing workings consciously in the dream state as the architect in the dream state, and then waiting to see them manifest in what we consider the waking state. And so, like we were talking 9/11, we started with Crowley, and his workings. Where do you see, what are your thoughts?
I'm sorry, you have to repeat that. Their dog was kind of.
I know, sorry.
She made it.
They're getting all excited. So
You
where
like that question? Oh, yeah. Maybe the dog. Question.
How do you see that playing out? So by people who have attained this ability to remain lucid and be lucid in the dream state, and be as architects creating sigils and doing higher workings, and then watching them play out in waking life, or say not just personal stuff but public stuff. So, and because I'm tying this in, you did all the Crowley stuff and 9/11. It all seems connected to me.
Well, I would agree with that. So you're saying dreams, Crowley, and 9/11 are all connected?
The idea of manipulating the outer world through your inner world through a state of high lucidity, so that being awake within the dream. And so setting up a ritual sigil as a dreamer within the dream, and then waiting to see how it plays out in the outer world. Is this a possibility?
I don't know. You have to ask a practicing magician. I don't know. I think that it's an interesting concept. I think if I understand what you're trying to impart, but I would think that that means that you are trying to create a circumstance of like ritual magic in your mind that then you wake up and then impart out there. Wouldn't you say that's some kind of like magic? I mean, it's some kind of magical practice. Like I would put that on a different thing than saying a prayer or something like that. Yeah, I don't know. I assume maybe there's some magical manual about that. doing some kind of mind ritual and having it internalized. If you want to get into Crowley's kind of dictums, the whole purpose of magic is to create change and conformance of your will, right? So if your will is to facilitate this change in the world, then maybe you do some ritual to help them make that happen. I think that Crowley himself would ritualize almost any of his desires to try to make them manifest. Absolutely.
What do you think the difference in, say, a high lucidity dream where you're awake, you're just totally awake, you know you're awake, and for whatever reason, whatever got you to that state within your dream, and this state of consciousness where we are talking here and we're awake talking. And so
Right.
I'm feeling a nowness, so.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess you would have to try to get into that state. I mean, wouldn't you call like a yogic practice trying to get into that high-end kind of semi-sleep state where you create change, whatever you want? In some ways, you could say that that's some kind of Eastern practice, right? So
That's just. Sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I don't know. I'm just kind of.
I think the whole idea, especially with magic and swamis or gurus or whatever, is to get into an altered state of consciousness. I mean, Crowley's talked about that. And it's in that state is where you can connect to things outside of this physical realm. I think that's kind of the goal. And then if you can get their attention, you can manipulate reality. If it's a thing, if it's not you.
I would assume, I don't practice magic, but I would assume there's some kind of manual or something Crowley would do, or anybody who would want to make those changes, right? So you do these different rituals to get in that different state to get what you want, whether it's efficacious or I don't know the idea. I don't practice magic.
Well, even
They're all
you don't
different.
have to practice magic, but like say, even as a Christian, when the idea of prayers,
Right,
and that kind of stuff, and say the idea of prayer in the purest of forms, talking about getting closer to God, and say in the highest form, instead of let my baseball team win, please God, like some people get into that, but these states where you're trying to ascend further, and that could be viewed in the same light. It's just a different tent. And
I would agree with that. I think that if you look from a Christian tradition, I do think that people who are involved in prayer, once they wake up, they're in a different state, right? That's the whole idea of prayer, whether it's you're trying to solve your problem, trying to look at reality through God's eyes, try to do what Jesus do in a very trite explanation. But once they're done with prayer, that's the whole thing. So whether you're in church, whether you're at the foot of your bed before you go to sleep, I mean, that was a very important part of the Christian tradition, was to say a prayer before you go to bed, right? So then you're entering into this state with a heightened, hopefully a closer or heightened connection to the Creator. Does that make sense?
yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of where I'm going, is that process of getting connected, and with so, and I wanted to make that difference, the differentiation between the person that's praying for the baseball team, right, and the person that's looking to get closer to God, because that's a different state of mind.
Way different. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so, okay, so with that in mind, let's back out into this apparent reality that we call reality, waking life. What do you think? What's the difference between, and this is opinion, this is where you stand, the idea of waking life and, say, this acute dream life where you are, and I'm talking about the waking dream life, so the lucid dream life.
So in a state of being asleep. So what's the difference between
within
Right
being
now?
awake within being asleep. Remember, lucidity and the lucid dream is you're awake within the dream.
Right.
And then so that state of being to this state of being where we all agree that we're talking via Zoom and
Right. Well,
all this.
I would say the distinction would be a much more physical as opposed to mental and spiritual state would be might be my primary distinctions. Because if you're not using your body and you're in a state of heightened awareness in a liminal sleep or a heightened sleep or whatever you want to call it, that would be my primary distinction. That would be the difference.
Or a psilocybin trip.
Or psilocybin trip, maybe if that's it. If that really works. I mean, how do you get into that state? I mean, if you look into kind of mystical traditions, people do all whirling dervishes, they do all kinds of different things to get into a heightened state, right?
Absolutely, and the spinning is definitely one of them.
Spinning, yoga, meditation,
fasting,
mantras.
Fasting.
Well, that's my point, is how real is this apparent reality and so beyond the idea of the wheel of every day, of stuff that has to be accomplished every day, that is actually kind of a mindless sleep state.
Yes, no, that's a good point. Definitely. That's a great question. I mean, you're getting. I mean, it seems like you're kind of getting into the mystery of consciousness. Like what part of consciousness are you at any given time of the day? So I would say that internal life is just as important as the external life. I think that most people's external life influences the external life. The internal life influences the external life. So I would say almost your internal life is more important, how you see the world, how you perceive things. But I do think that the realm of the senses exists. Absolutely.
Well, and it's all murky water when we put anything from the now into the past, and especially as we go back. Memory is a very strange thing.
Yes. No question.
And it's as liminal as dreams. It's what holds it down to what we consider reality is what pictures, movie, video of us at some point. I mean,
how past is the past? How do you make that? I mean, really, people are still bitching about history that happened 5,000 years ago, right? I don't know.
Absolutely.
Making conscious present day decisions based upon events that happened in prehistory. So to say that some of that stuff is really that past, well, then you have to kind of grade it. How far past is it? I don't know. Some of these, and some of these memories, yes. I don't know.
In dreams, William, have you experienced people that have passed? Or even better yet, did you know they were going to pass before they did pass?
No, but I've heard of people who've had those kind of experiences. I think that some people are more attuned. I would say that it's like people's capacity for hypnotism is all different. So some people are much more easy in that kind of precog, whatever you want to call it, deja vu, sensitivities. Certain people are more attuned than others. So, but I've never experienced that, but I know people who have. I know somebody died and then they find it. So I've heard many, many, many of these stories.
Yeah. Have you experienced, so that aside, what about just experiencing people that have died in dreams? You see they're dead and then they show up.
I'm trying to remember. I've been very fortunate. I don't have a lot of death, like family death or anything like that. But trying to remember, like
even
really
pets count. The pets.
Count. I remember my pets. Yeah, I still have good memories of my pets. My first dog was Snoopy. So I still had, when I was a kid, I had more dreams of him.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Snoopy in them? I love that. I love that you call it
things like that. Yeah. I think that those Charlie Brown was a little more. Maybe it's influential still. I don't know. Seems like it was more influential back then. But I don't
So
remember a lot of dead. I don't have dead people talking to me or giving me advice like some people have. Or much closer to loved ones in their mind. So I don't really have that.
yeah, yeah, and you are lucky that that you still have you've been graced with.
Unfortunate. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's so many other tragedies out there that haven't befallen my people in my orbit. But yeah, I just don't. I have a very boring dream. I think you can tell. It's not that exciting.
I disagree. I don't categorize in that way.
Okay.
So with this idea, what do you think? And again, this is all fodder, and
Okay.
it's philosophizing in a way. What do you think? How does the process of death? What is the death experience? How is it separate from all this? And even death is a state of consciousness.
Absolutely. So I think that there's some element of our lives that is like a soul. So I think that the body dies and something that isn't quantifiable yet goes somewhere else. Just kind of for me, it's the Christian afterlife. You go to a place, you become judged, and that's for me is what happens. And in some ways, it's not really reincarnation, it's really a resurrection some other place. So uh that's I don't believe in I'm not a Darwinist. I don't believe in permanent death or anything. I believe in the concept of the soul.
I like your distinction here with resurrection to reincarnation. I find that provocative and beautiful, and it resonates with me, by the way. So
Well, I mean, if you accept Christ as Messiah, who, like I do, who is the resurrection and the life, and that God sent Christ into the world to redeem all of humanity from the greatest problems of humanity, which are sin and death. Sin is kind of like an error in behavior, and I do believe that Christ has that power. So then you believe in some other time and place outside of normal time that happens. And I think that that's the potency of the Christ story that a lot of people didn't realize, is that he was the first fruits of the resurrection and came back and talked to his disciples, the ones that remained, and tried to show that thing. So that's really the great hope for all God's creation, is this state and place of being that transcends corruption and death. And I think that's really something that's not emphasized enough about Christ, is that it's about becoming perfect in the eyes of God. I think through Christ, that through his teachings and emulating that's really the core power of Christ. Christianity in its core sense, not the churchianity version, but that's the core for all people. And I think that's really the power of what's known as the gospel. That's really good.
The idea of transcendence is a big one across the board, as you know, and you just gave us that with the Christ narrative, and with the resurrection, and also I think when I think reincarnation as opposed to resurrection, and I view that from the eyes of, say, immortality, right, of the soul, uh, then the idea of reincarnation has this connotation for me of almost like a memory wipe.
Right. Yes, I would agree with that.
what resurrection is, you've ascended in some way, almost like a fractal, right? Or Mandelbrot, you've just spiraled into a new level of of consciousness that
Yeah.
is still maintaining, and hence that immortality thing. And I'm wondering what your ideas are with states of consciousness via dreams, death, waking life, funneled through the idea of resurrection and immortality. What's is there Does this go beyond the linear experience for you? Is
I would
there
say so. I
further?
mean, they talk about, yeah, so like when you die, your soul go. I don't have the Catholic view. You go to, well,
A happy place.
yeah, you go to the happy place. But I mean, I think that like the view of the
Is it
world.
limbo? The Catholics have limbo.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm trying
limbo,
to
purgatory, heaven, hell.
purgatory.
Yeah.
That's the word. Thank you. Yeah, so I don't believe in that. I think that your soul goes in time, in God's time. Um, you get judged for your works, and then you get your heavenly reward. So I do believe that something like that. So I would say that death, some form of your consciousness, something of your immortal being, transcends the end of life. So, and then if you might, whether that's a dream state or something like that, I don't know. I mean, you really kind of get into what you really believe. It's like, what are these different states of being? Because um, you're into like some pretty heavy duty mysteries and how to explain them. How do you explain reincarnation or resurrection, really? So if you were looking at it from a Hindu view, you're reincarnated, right? So where does your soul go? How does it get redone? So I mean, it's interesting too because the I was reading the Greek view of their idea of reincarnation, and it kind of overlaps with Christian and Hindu ideas. But it's your soul is taken over the river Styx, right? And then you get judged for your works. I think this was from Plato. You get judged for your works, and then you get reincarnated based upon prior works. So the Greeks had a kind of this kind of hybrid view of the transcendence of the soul, but that almost kind of has a kind of Christian view in a lot of ways. If you're being judged for your works, whether they were good and evil. So to say what a state of death is like for the soul, I don't know. I couldn't consciously respond to that.
Is there I'm interested in also with how when we're talking transcendence and and everything that could bring forward. Is there and then so you bring in the idea of good and evil, a set of polarities. How heavily, and we certainly do see polarity in a lot of uh, structured religions for sure. It seems to be one of the
Yeah, I would say so.
a key factor. How do we gauge though is what is good and what's evil? It seems like there's so much hinging on both ideas at either end. And if we step back and look from a broader perspective, and I guess that's more Eastern, right? Because that brings in the idea of karma and dharma and all that. Uh, but how do you gauge that on, I guess, your morality compass of what's good and what's bad?
I mean, I think that you look for those rules that are set aside by God through the prophets, right? Or from God himself. So, and I do actually think a lot of morality is universal anyway. So if you look at the 10 Commandments and what's structured in there, a lot of those principles you would find in any type of social structure. You know, you don't covet other people's property. You don't. You respect your elders. You respect your parents, whether it's, you know, honor your mother and father. So I do think that those are kind of universal attributes. So
Didn't
know,
George
so-
Carlin reduce those to like 2?
I don't
One
know.
of his skits,
Probably
yeah.
you might be able to.
It's like don't fuck with anybody and don't fuck with their stuff. Was pretty much the gist of it.
Love
Might be
George
that
Carlin.
simple. Yeah. So some people might overthink it. So I think in subtle, in much more subtle instances, you know, you have these. You probably always have had some type of tribal leader or a judge or something who tries to ascertain what's best in any circumstance in any particular field. But I think the general morale, if you look really at I think the Christian tradition, it's really about how you treat other people. Almost all of it is talking about how you relate to God and other people. So I think that that's really about kind of good and evil. I mean, even the Lord's Prayer, the final word is deliver us from evil. So there's an acknowledgement that something outside, evil can be described as something outside of these simple rules, right? So if you look at the Ten Commandments, you can invert it or pull some satanic LeBayan type trick and invert it, and that would be just, you know, would be considered evil. So I don't think that it's a super complex question. I think that I think for me it's easy to look at scripture, and even in some of these other civilizations, you know, they didn't witches were bad, witchcraft was not really seen as a positive. So, you know, these are things that exist even if you want to take away biblical scripture, I think.
I do. I agree that I think that for me, I know to not go kill people. You know, like
That's a better translation than
so
thou shalt
inherently,
not kill. It's really you should not murder.
right? And so some of this stuff just seems
Unless you
so
have to.
Unless you
standard,
have to, right? Well, that's why. I mean, you're not supposed to plot somebody's death, right?
right? And
Right,
I guess
exactly.
that's a distinction.
Right.
See, that's where and again, that's how tricky all this gets. So I understand that, and I think a lot of people go by it. I really do like the idea of looking at tribal communities and how they run, because you get a good idea. And you know, we've got shamans in most of them. So, but back to this idea of where I'm going with this is, so the juxtaposition of good and evil and dreaming, wake life, and this set of apparent dualities. And I just, you know, I think that that's very limiting, to say the least. But so, as we were talking about death in connection to all this, is it possible that we are in a state of dreaming? And I know that's, again, sounds kind of Eastern philosophy, but in the end, when you're outside of the nowness, there is nothing else. The nowness is everything.
Yeah, I mean, those are good questions. Who is in a dream state? Going through today is staring at a monitor actually a technological creation of a dream state? Because it is a different state if you're just staring at a monitor all day, right? So
Right.
it's a tough one. Or even just staring at your phone. You want to get into that mystery of human cognition and consciousness. It's like there's all kinds of different states, and I think that really successful, malevolent politicians and things can really mess with people's mind and put them in kind of a reactionary dream state, and you know, through mind control on a very general level. So to say that we're all in some kind of fugue state or something, you know, I do think people are in a fugue state. If you do a lot of mental health pharmaceuticals, I think you're in a fugue state. I think that puts you in. So I think it's like going back to one of the earlier things I said is you got to start parsing through these different states. And I think that the Hindu tradition actually does that very well because they talk about different states of consciousness, and I think that ties in with chakras. And I do think that those are valid. I think those are valid typologies to really talk about. So
I was on Lexapro for over 10 years. It's definitely a different state of consciousness.
Different song.
Oh yeah, it's it puts you in this mood where everything can wait. Like I'll do it tomorrow, but like every day, like I'll do it tomorrow, and nothing happens. It's like just this, you're idling.
Yeah, I've heard of that. I've heard of that same thing on people who've done not Xant. What's the big antidepressant?
Zoloft.
Oh, Zoloft or something like that. Does that really put you into a?
Yeah. Yeah, Zoloft is a real strong one. Lexapro is more of an SNRI than an SSRI.
And what was that one Stevie Nicks said was worse than anything else? Klonopin? I think that's it.
That's a drug.
Well, it was prescribed to her by her doctor when she went through rehab for cocaine. And she said it was worse than anything she had done.
It's worse than the coke.
Yeah, worse, more addicting, and she lost a decade of her life on that.
Wow.
I could say the same.
I've heard really terrible things about some of these other pain medications too. Is that coming off of them is like you'd much rather be on a roller coaster all day.
Yeah,
that's the way it feels. I can't remember what the name of the drug is.
Right, you go through more pain.
I remember coming off
the pain meds.
The Lexapro. Every step I took felt like an electric shock through my body.
Yeah, no, I've heard of something like that too. Somebody had like pulses going up their spine.
Yes, yeah, it's really weird.
Yeah.
And what did you think though? I mean, that seems like that would be alarming to me.
My doctor had never heard of it. Like, oh, she's like, I don't know. I'm like, okay. I don't know. That was weird. It went away quickly, but it was creepy.
So I want to touch on, and we did touch on this a little bit earlier, but the idea of memory. And so lucidity in the state of now, and we all understand that this is not a video, although sim theory people will differ, but this video game, let me put it this way, this video game is sensate heavy. So, I cut you, you bleed, and it hurts. Right? So this idea of the lucidity of now, that keeps us in the now, and everything else that is not around the nowness, the idea of memory behind or created active memory pushing forward your ideas into the future, still takes you out of now. And so with that in context to dreaming, and so I'm still on transcendence here, William. Okay. Is there anything that moves, if we're always here in the now, how does all the rest of this play come into factor? Do you die? What else can happen if you're always conscious right now? How is it all playing?
I know people say, when you keep saying now, it sounds like Charles Manson or something like that. There's only now is important. But I think that all those people's memories are informing the now, right? So you touch a hot skillet, not to do that again. I think everybody's actually touched a hot skillet just to see what it's like. So then they know not to do it. So I think all those memories.
And that brings you into the now, right?
Sure it does.
Man, this hurt.
Yeah. So that's really the tough thing about those emotional states. If you're in a lot of pain, maybe it's telling you something, You're a lot of emotional pain or things like that from your memories. Maybe it should hurt. Maybe if you went through a difficult time, you don't want to do that again. You don't want to get in those positions. So I'm not one of those believers of everything now. It sounds like Scientology or Charles Manson. Forget the past. There's no future, just the present. Because
Yeah.
we're all making decisions about what we're going to be in the future, whether what we're doing tomorrow, in a week, whether we're making plans for our cats, kids. So the past informs the present, informs the future. And then if you want to get into like, history, he controls the past, controls the present.
Yes. I'm with you. I've always been too pragmatic for the complete idea of the nowness, right? It makes no sense to me that if I'm constantly thinking it seems new age and flaky in a weird way to
Seems to me too. Like, I don't know. I think that's kind of if you want to get into memory and how that intertwines with learning and how it intertwines with experience and how that informs you as a person and how it shapes your character, I think that you need to have that past. You need to have those. That's why everybody's going to get educated, whatever they're getting educated, whether it's brain surgery, fly a plane, sail a boat. So all those things are important. I mean, if you really want to get into it. So I don't think, that those accrued experiences inform now, I think in a positive way.
So when people talk about the idea of dreams, and so not from the physical aspect of going to sleep and having a dream, but I dreamed, I have a dream and
Right.
all that, which is usually about something better in the future and
Right.
moving forward.
Yes.
I find that twist of the language interesting because we have the idea, of course, you go to sleep and you have those dreams. And so you as a trained attorney know how tricky language it is, right? I mean, that's what you studied. You attorneys. I married an attorney, so
What kind of law does he practice?
criminal law. I'm not married to him anymore. But criminal law. I went to Chicago, Kent,
Nice.
and and actually, he's the public defender of a county in Illinois.
Oh, good. That's an important job. They don't get a lot of respect.
I insisted. He was working, got out of school, and ended up in like a silk stockings firm, all that, and he's coming home shaking. I'm like, I can't deal with this. You're not, it's changing you, and so I thought we would do for the better, right? But be a public defender.
Well, some of those law firms, man, they're really, lawyering is pretty cutthroat, and some of those environments are not conducive to a stable emotional state.
No, and I was witnessing that. This is a great guy, and I was witnessing it transform him in a bad way. And
Well,
so
you want to talk about dreams of the past informing the future. I wonder how many lawyers, when their dreams of what they were going to be as a lawyer were the same as what happened to them when they were done. Because there's a lot of lawyers who want to get out of lawyering.
Yes, there are so many. That's such an interesting query, William, and there are a lot. We've had several on here, or at least I can think of 3 or 4, and a couple that went way woo, like into channeling and all that.
Dude, they'll snap back too. Some of those people got a lawyer in a year. They're in an ashram.
Do you think the increase in the use of the law as a weapon, lawfare, as it were, is causing these people to leave that they had intended to do? Go on.
I think it's a lot of different pressures. I think that there's an idealized view of this, noble character. Guys, I got to wrap this up in about 5 or 10 minutes. I wish I could stay for the whole 2 hours. But there's like this idea of this noble character, and then they get in there and they got to make money, and you got to bill, and you have to deal with these other people, and there's a lot of competition, and so it's not that. I was in a law firm once where a guy billed 24 hours straight for like 6 days. So the pressures were so intense that he just kept billing. It was incredible. There's no way a human being could do that. But he would bill for 24 hours straight. It's incredible. So
That's terrible.
Yeah, no, it was unethical. But
That's great.
the thing is that if you're a clever biller, you can bill 6 different clients, and they think you're doing all your work for them. So they don't see the other people getting billed bad.
Yeah. Yeah, I witnessed a lot of that too. Jerry, do we have, I guess we should take questions with this last few.
If anyone has
any.
If anyone has questions, put them in chat. But in the meantime, do you have anything you'd like to plug? Current things?
No, I just finished I updated my old documentary called Occult Hollywood. I did it 10 years ago, so I put out volume 2 and talked a lot about, you want to talk about symbolism and dreams, and whole 2001 I tried to really break down the symbolism of the monolith, and I think people find it interesting. It's on Vimeo, so you can go to Vimeo and just type in Occult Hollywood or William Ramsey, and then I also did a documentary, a pretty depressing documentary of the murder of young men that's happening all across the world, called Smiley-Face Killers.
Is it the push ones?
Yeah, right. So they call it in Manchester, they call it the pusher. So this phenomenon of guys going out at night and then disappearing and being found in water. They call it here in the States the Smiley-Face Killers because they found this smiley face symbol.
Wasn't that the serial killer in a TV show too? The Mentalist, right?
Yes, excellent. Very good. That's a great reference, and I included that in my documentary because symbolism is an important part, I think, of the serial killing. So in general, as people are going back to college who have even women and men, men can get drugged just as much as a woman can get drugged. So that's really kind of the rise of, I think these men are being abducted, kept for a time, and then they're either drowned or ritually drowned and then dumped in water to make it look like it. So it's really hard to believe that that's happening, but I think through my research, that is what is happening. And I show it, and I try to prove it. Those are both on Vimeo. And then all my books are available on Amazon. People, I actually have been doing a podcast. I've done a lot of interviews recently of William Ramsey Investigates, which you can see on Spreaker, iHeartRadio. And I've been really enjoying that.
And YouTube as well. That's where I found your podcast.
Oh, yeah.
One of your podcast sites isn't updating. I should let you know that. I don't remember which one, but it was only up till like April of 2018.
Okay, that's probably, that might be my YouTube channel or something.
It was Podbean or Spreaker maybe. I don't know. I'm sorry.
I'm pretty sure my Spreaker is up to date because that's where I'm supposed to upload to Spreaker, and then
it goes off.
Spreaker's but shoots it out to Apple and everybody else. So I'm hoping Spreaker is good. So, but I've had some really interesting guests, and I had Benias on recently, who was fantastic. Excellent book. Really fascinating book. I want to listen to you guys talking to Benias.
Was it the Reframing the Debate book?
No, that's the one, the UFO people. Yeah, very strange culture, a very curious culture, I think.
Curious, yeah. Yeah, but MJ Benias is awesome. That was a great show.
Oh, man. I could have done 2 hours. I kind of try to do my podcast a little shorter so people can listen, but also I don't like to do a full book report. I find that format is good for people to kind of get their points in as fast as can, and then people go and read. I'm a promoter of book reading, so people go and check out some books. There's so many good books out. I mean, almost.
Oh my God, there's so many. Man, there's like a resurgence in good books.
Yeah, no, it's really something happened. I don't know. People really are trying to put out some really thoughtful, intense stuff, like the O'Neill book about Manson and chaos and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think with sites like Lulu coming online, it's more approachable.
I think so.
I know, like, I used to write tech books, and you always had to find a publisher. I had a publisher, but you had to pitch an idea, and you had to get it approved, and the editor, and yada, yada, yada. It was a thing. Now you can just, write a Word document and put it on Lulu, and you got a book. You're an author.
I mean, it has its perils. So you can put out like a not a great research book, but also for somebody, you cut out that middleman. So if you have an audience, it's a much more financially advantageous. When I was trying to market my first book, they were talking about 10% net. So
I know, it's such a racket.
I got 2%, so that's good.
yeah, I was looking at them like, hold on, 10% net. Let me calculate that. Yeah, no. So I was a self with all of its peril. But yeah, no, so there's really good stuff to read out there. So
well, I don't want to keep you. I know you have to go. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
guys, it's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed it. Really good mental, spiritual exercise. I didn't really know what to expect, but I'm really delighted to you. Thank you so much.
Well,
You were,
thanks for
William,
coming on.
thank you. You were fun to talk with. I enjoyed all of your answers. You know, I enjoyed getting a deeper look into who you are.
Thank you.
Right. And thanks everyone for listening. And be sure to tune in next week. This time we're going to have our show, The Obelisk, will be on. And that's going to be a good one, all about 9/11. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening on the podcast. And we will talk to you guys next week. Take care.